You carry the same blood as us, it seems. Nevertheless, you're an outsider. Just remember, if you become unpleasant to our eyes, you'll face severe consequences.
In my ongoing search to find the most disturbing mysteries in RE4, I was always neglecting one in particular, one of which I have always considered to be either too graphic or too disturbing to look further into. I assume that most of us still playing the original game were fans since childhood, and I have disclosed in length that mysteries such as the sack creature or mysterious stalker have always been some of the most terrifying in any Resident Evil game. I am confident that I left the most disturbing one for last, and aside from my initial hesitancy to make a video on it, I think it's about time we talk about the deceased villager theory, the most disturbing theory in the game. As said in my previous videos, the primary display of Resident Evil 4's horror elements can be found in the village segment. If solely based off of the first act, I would consider RE4 on par with the other horror titles of the series. The first scare is a staple for Resident Evil, the initial hook that pulls you in, or in most cases makes you quit the game forever and have nightmares about it. Resident Evil 4 has one of these, but unlike RE1, it's an optional piece of dialogue after your first encounter with an enemy, hidden underneath the staircase. This is a core question that will stay in your head for the duration of the village. There's skulls on every signpost, there's wheelbarrows full of deceased villagers, there's a woman impaled with a pitchfork. These scenes are only prevalent in the village and nowhere else. In fact, the game seems to make these displays as disturbing and suspicious as possible. We need to understand why these villagers were killed, and why they've been lumped into wheelbarrows of all places. We also need to discuss who these people were prior to their deaths. It's no secret that the village is an extremely confidential place. Its residents retaliate against any outsider who isn't infected with the Las Plagas, and are generally very hostile people when it comes to protecting their religion and their land. This is apparent from the very start of the game, where we encounter numerous ambushes, traps, and environmental hazards. We know per my last mystery that the bridge attack was orchestrated ahead of time in preparation for Leon, but that isn't the case with all of the traps we see. The signposts in particular are extremely old and decayed. We can tell that just by looking at them. They obviously weren't placed here preemptively, they were here for ages. I think, on top of keeping outsiders from entering the village, the main intention of these traps were to prevent defectors from escaping during the early periods of Los Illuminatos' reinitiation. The bear traps were originally used to capture people. Their intention, to leave traitors trapped long enough for the parasite to eventually bring them around. Those who rejected the parasite were probably subject to these types of punishments under Sadler. We know this because he uses the same time-wasting tricks on Leon throughout the game.
Soon, you will become unable to resist this intoxicating power.
The bodies seen in the wheelbarrows are a more recent incident compared to the skulls under the staircase. These people are still decomposing en masse, implying some sort of event where many were killed in a small amount of time. Or, only the villagers on top of the pile are newly deceased, with the people underneath being in a similar state to those seen previously. I think the extent of this pile are simply normal ganados who have all died because of the diseases stemming from the filthy living conditions of the farm. The villagers live in extremely primitive conditions. The age expectancy of this region will be around 40 years of age, meaning since every infected ganado is also an adult, deaths will be persistent. When you consider things like El Gigante on top of that, it doesn't surprise me that the ganados are dying all of the time. Any effort to bury or properly manage all of these bodies have evidently been ruled too tedious of a task given the sheer quantity of them, leading to the disturbing imagery encountered at the farm. Of course, there still could have been instances of infighting or resistance against Sadler in this modern period. The dead woman is the best example of this, and it's still unknown as to why she was killed. Maybe the events surrounding Ashley's kidnapping were frowned on by some of the more compassionate villagers, and this woman was killed in an attempt to save Ashley or leave the village to ask for help. I think this is also very plausible. The long deceased bodies, on the other hand, are much more compelling to figure out. In the end credits, there's actually a lot more context surrounding these villagers during this respective time period. The younger people couldn't sustain the growth of a Las Plagas and died as a result. Many children passed during this time, as sad as it is. However, up until now, we don't really know what happened to them, but I think I found out where they went. Remember the skulls on the signposts scattered throughout the village? Some people would argue that these are adult skulls by their large size, but I'm not convinced. Human skulls grow very slowly proportionate to the rest of your body, peaking at around age 7, where it slows down even more over the course of your life. My point is that these could still be the skulls of, and my suspicions were unfortunately proven correct when I regretfully looked further into it. These aren't adult teeth, they are undoubtedly baby's teeth. The rest of the skulls found throughout the village can be linked to the many human villagers seen in the end credits. On the final slide, we see people standing around the village square, shocked at the sight of a mutated Plagas. We can also see similar drawings depicting people being forced against their will to undergo transfusion. It's clear that a large portion of the village's population were entirely against the Los Illuminatos. Presumably, many of them successfully escaped the village with their children, while others weren't as lucky. And the aftermath can all be seen by Leon in the events of Resident Evil 4. Some people have successfully pointed out the possibility of some of these skulls being that of other outsiders who have made their way to the village. I'm not going to use the remake as evidence, but that whole game's introduction sequence reveals the deaths of missing hikers. This could be the case in the original game, but why didn't the police officers mention this in their reports? If there was any evidence of missing persons reports in the area, the Spanish police would have been all over this place. Leon's escort here was under the premise of a kidnapping. They'd have Leon armed at the teeth, backup included, if the atrocities of the Los Illuminatos were made public. This unfortunately rules out the possibility of any villagers ever successfully escaping the area, children included. In summary, I think the majority of the dead bodies seen in the wheelbarrow are those of previously deceased ganados who have died of disease or injury, and that the skulls are those of human defectors of the first rebellion against Sadler, as made evident by the end credits. And I'd rather not repeat the more disturbing characteristics, but you know my opinion already, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it. With that out of the way, we can ask the fun question, why are they in a wheelbarrow? This implies that they are being sent somewhere. Maybe it's the Bingo VIP lounge. Let's go over it. Del Lago was the byproduct of an early experiment to test the effects of animal hosts in relation to the Las Plagas' effects. Prior to experimentation, Del Lago was but a small salamander who grew exponentially as the parasite mutated its body. Similarly to the El Gigantes, Del Lago was banished to the lake when its size made it almost impossible to control. Understanding his mistake, Sadler appointed the large salamander as the lake's guardian indefinitely, feeding it vast quantities of disposed bodies to sustain itself. I actually love the lore surrounding Del Lago, and I want to make an entire video just talking about the lake section because of how relaxing of an area it is. This answer to the latter question was always quite an easy one, given the information around Del Lago. We see one of the police officers get eaten by it when we reach the lake. Del Lago has an insatiable hunger for human bodies. This is why it jumps out at us if we decide to shoot the water. It's clear that Del Lago's creation was to dispose of the abundance of dead bodies scattered throughout the village. These experiments probably took place not long after Los Illuminatos was re-established. They just needed a way to get rid of them all, and Delago was the outcome of that. Obviously, those who have been dead for a long time couldn't have been fed to Delago. This includes the children in particular, hence the reason why they decided to string up their skulls as a warning instead. But what about the actual wheelbarrow? These bodies are decomposing also. Surely they wouldn't have lumped them all together without throwing them in the lake. It's a good question, but when we look to the right of it, we can see that it's actually broken, most likely broken from overuse. These poor souls have been left here to rot instead, but at least we know that Delago is still eating well. We're not entirely done just yet. There's also the plague-infected dogs, which Salazar claims as his pets. Judging by this interaction, it wouldn't be far-fetched to consider that these bodies are also fed to the dogs to keep Salazar happy.
Do you know that no one dies without a cause? You will satisfy the stomachs of my cute pets.
The extent of which this occurs I'm not sure, and they probably don't eat as much as Delago, he's quite a biggin, but it's a good theory to throw out there at least. So that about sums up this mystery for me. Sorry if I went a little too dark at times, I just wanted to give my honest opinion on this one. Again, please mention anything in the comments that I could have missed, anything that you'd like to be featured, or a theory of your own.